And welcome back. It's time for Opinion Court. Get in touch with us on 22422, which is our SMS line. And if you're online, please use the hashtag Opinion Court. That's one word. It helps us to track your feedback. I'll introduce my guests to you. To my left, you haven't seen him in a little while. Steve Ogola is a city lawyer and a regular commentator on the show. To my right is Mark Bichachi, a political and communications analyst. And next to him is Edward Kisiangani, who is our resident political analysts. Let's start with the matters of sugar today. And there was quite some heated debate in Parliament. Basically, the decision of the chair being, not a good enough job was done. Go back. Some of the issues that people wanted to know, is the very basics. Is there mercury or lead or copper or, as they even, went ahead to kid at some point, alcohol in the sugar? What do you think about the work that Kanini Kega's joint team did? Did they do Kenyans a disservice? Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. I think, first of all, it's very important to de-emphasize this report on two grounds. One is the constitutional ground, which is, if you look at Article 95, Sub-Article 2, Parliament is mandated to inquire or investigate and resolve. Resolve means making a resolution as to whether there was a breach of the law. Parliament does not have the kind of investigative powers as to fault find, or maybe to make determination of findings that are conclusive in nature. So if you look at the recommendation, the executive conclusion, that there are about 9 recommendations so far, none of those recommendations speak to the mandate of Parliament, which means either the report is not yet, as they said, is just interim. What we expect to do is this. Parliament should be telling the people of Kenya that these are the public officers that were involved in these processes, and this is how the law was falsified, for political accountability. Not to make recommendation on how independent offices or public officers should work, because that would look like a functional interference with the functional mandate. Theirs is interrogate and say, where did the process go wrong, and who holds the political accountability? That is the communication that should be coming from the chair. That is the limited mandate in terms of oversighting public officers and the processes that involve the people. But
I mean, at the very core of it, we just want to know whether this sugar is safe or not, and whether the relevant state agencies actually did their job right. And if there's something wrong with the sugar, why is it still on our shelves, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's quite a gaffe on the part of everyone who's involved in this particular debacle. Number one, we have not even separated the kinds of sugar that we have. There's industrial sugar, there's raw sugar, and then there's a table sugar that we use. This report did not address itself to any of those matters. Number two, there was no address of the amount, because they didn't find mercury, but they didn't find higher levels than of lead and copper than is permissible in sugar, which is not really a problem, because if you import raw sugar, that's why it's called raw sugar, it requires further processing. So the whole thing does not address the issues. That is one. And number two, what is to my disappointment is they're not telling Kenyans which sugar is safe, which sugar is not, because we have no idea. Are they telling us that the next time I go to the supermarket, I should abandon Coca-Cola and every other ice cream that has sugar because it's the industrial sugar that has a problem? Or should I not buy certain brands in the supermarket? Or have they recalled it? So in matters of one, giving guidance to the public, they've totally failed. In matters two, in writing a report, which, by the way, Anne, I could have written that on my toilet seat before breakfast, and I've written a better report about sugar. I'm telling you, it required minimum effort and even less IQ to write that report.
Oh goodness, Prof, but is it becoming quite wow, Mark, typical of Parliament in a sense, because part of what you hear are allegations that this committee was compromised, and that's why they came up with this sort of work. I mean, not necessarily allegations that have been substantiated, but it just is what we hear over and over regarding parliamentary committees, that basically MPs are out there to be rented.
I think when most members of the public had an interest in this matter, and they still do, and some of us listened to the proceedings in the sessions conducted by the Parliamentary Select Committee, on trade and so on, and agriculture, and you could see the presentations from the people they interviewed. So what is at stake now and what is critical, you forget about the petulance that you saw some MPs exhibit in Parliament today. What is critical is to look at what their mandate is, as Steve is saying, and whether they accomplish their mandate. I get the impression that most members of Parliament who sit on parliamentary committees do not have the competency to write a report. And but they have the competency to campaign in elections. They need Parliament needs to be assisted. If you look at some of the comments that have come from the Speaker, he said that some of you, and it's quoted, some of you have been going to parliamentary, you don't know how to conduct parliamentary business. You go to committees, and instead of doing your business, you start hugging each other, and that is not part of the business you go to do. So you can almost suddenly say that there is a level of incompetence among parliamentary members of Parliament in terms of writing reports and in terms of even listening to what they asked for. So I don't think they even captured some of the things that came from those who presented, and that is why I think.
But is it inability or is it the fact that you've been compromised?
Yes, there could be both. There could be inability, but there could also be compromise. But now what we can prove right now straight away is that if you look at the fellows that are involved in this thing, they are highly educated people, and they were listening. Some of them were listening, and we could see they are taking note. There is a parliamentary committee. It has a backing of a secretariat. The secretariat captured certain things. So were these things completely rejected and were not put in the report, or it is because they didn't just see those as important? So it can be both, and it can be inability, but I get the impression that it's probably inability because these things have been happening in other parliamentary committees. So they should refund all the money. That is my point. They must refund all the money they spend on sitting. We do not know. This is this is night time. I don't know whether the sugar we are taking is safe. When C.S. Matiang'i said that sugar did not have or had some impurities, some lead, some copper, some members of Parliament outside the committees protested about that. Now we have those ones inside the committees not saying anything about that. But if you look at the presentation that came from the Kenya Bureau of Standards managing director before he was arrested, he said the only thing that he was confident about with regard to the laboratory tests was that there was no mercury. But he was unable to say whether there was no lead or there was no copper. Now, in this case, there have been conflicting reports that there was lead, there was copper. So what these guys were supposed to tell the public is that we have established there was no lead. We have established there was no copper. We have established there was no mercury. But they have talked about the mercury, and then finally the chairman of the Parliamentary Select Committee says he was intimidated by the majority leader to give a report when they were not ready. This is frivolous. If you are not ready, why do you present a report?
And to be
Kanini Kega.
No, to be honest, Prof, just to highlight a few things. Number one, these are adult, mature Kenyans who went to school and wrote a report a Form 4 would not write in one night. Number two, they did not address themselves to key issues that affect the sugar industry. I did not hear them mention the fate of farmers in Western Kenya.
But they wanted more time.
I'm trying to be as civil as possible, but more time, it was 10 pages. I saw the presentations of some of those people who went before that place when they were representing just a small part of this sugar case. They brought a lot more facts with them within 24 hours than this parliamentary committee, with a secretariat, with staff, with lawyers on hand within their staff to help them. They've produced a document that is not worth the paper it's written on.
But let me ask you, what has this whole sugar issue, Steve, revealed? Because you remember all the doublespeak that we've heard within state agencies, within amongst cabinet secretaries, etc., and now even Parliament itself. What has that revealed about the state of government and these agencies? I mean, who are Kenyans to trust?
That's what I'm trying to clarify. What we must understand, and if you have to look at what Prof. and Mark is saying, is Parliament wearing the right lenses within the law? Is it doing what has been committed to it, as opposed to what we may consider as functional overlap, reassigning to yourself functions that lie elsewhere, which you don't have the competencies to discharge? Now, the mandate of Parliament in post-2010 dispensation there's a public concern. As a consequence of this public concern, they are mandated to inquire. A consequence of that inquiry is a resolution. The resolution should tell us as follows. 1, the concerns are merited or not. If they are not merited, the matter rests. If they are merited, then who falsified the process? So they check the process as against the law. And you see, there are sectoral players. You're talking about the sugar industry. You're talking about the maize scandal, whatever scandal. There are sectoral players, and there's the relevant line ministry and the relevant minister and other state and public officers involved in terms of presiding over the processes of importing of that sugar. Did they do their job or did they not? Then what is the political consequence? Yes. Because you see, that is why Parliament sits there. What to frame the political consequence, and they say, if an indictment comes from Parliament, and Parliament says the Cabinet Secretary failed in his duty to supervise, that's a strong indictment that should motivate or inspire or maybe require the President to sack the CS or the Principal Secretary. Who is the person, who is the public official to be held accountable? The report doesn't disclose that. You know, instead, it recaptures or restates information that is publicly available. You know, it's 11 pages so far. They're calling it interim. And we're discussing, you know, with Mark before. The first 6 pages or 7 pages doesn't reveal anything. And when they come to the recommendation, they say investigations are ongoing, investigations are going. Fine, all of us know investigations are ongoing. What we wanted to hear, and what Parliament, if they are watching, should capture is this. From the information that they've gotten so far, can they tell us with certainty that the process was not followed? If the process was not followed, who is the responsible public or state official? And what is the kind of political accountability? Because other legal accountability measures will be defined by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Once the investigations are completed, charges will be framed if there's instances of abuse of office or complacency or breach of public trust. Those people will be declared unfit to hold office. So these are the kind of issues that Parliament ought to be teasing and not rehashing or maybe restating what is publicly available. I think they wore the wrong lenses, and they could only see could only give us the wrong outcome.
You know, Steve, just to chip in what you're saying, for the purpose of our viewers, we would expect Parliament to say there are several avenues we went to when we checked Kenya Ports Authority. We checked Kenya Bureau of Standards with regard to sugar. We checked CS Rotich with the Treasury and his Gazette notice. Then we also checked Matiang'i. We also checked the chairman of the Kenya Sugar Millers, this man from Eldoret, the Rai man. Then they say, each one of these was involved like this, but they broke the law here, or they didn't. Each one of then the public are saying, then what is our recommendation? That this one abused office, this one didn't do the right thing, from the basic standpoint of the facts we have found during the inquiry. Parliament didn't do this. That's why they should refund money.
Okay, but I suppose what may be laughable is to assume that they don't know that is what they should do.
But I don't think. And let me tell you, if I was a corrupter and had corrupted this particular sitting or committees of these 2 committees to corrupt this thing for me, then I would have wanted a refund, because if it is a cover-up, it is the most shoddy cover-up ever. Because
Mark, do you remember you said one day that when people enter politics, sometimes their IQ comes down. So it is possible that some of the IQ of these members of Parliament went down. They are not performing the duties we have given them.
Wow.
And I think what is also important to highlight is that Parliament should watch out, because even this oversight mandate is a function of public trust. If the ODPP comes up with concrete resolution, or maybe finding what we call prima facie evidence, that there was complacency, connivance, you know, on the part of certain public officials in discharging or oversighting the process, and therefore prefers charges against those officers, when Parliament rushed to clear these people, because Parliament is supposed to push for political accountability, and sometime in a perfect constitutional setup, there's supposed to be some confluence or some convergence. You can see Parliament's interrogation, they can easily reach a level and say, we are not persuaded that the CS or the PS or the other relevant state or public officers adhered strictly to the law. And therefore we require the president to take action. Then later, when the ODP's report investigation is over and the ODP report comes out and says we want to prefer charges, then you can look at you can see some semblance of symbiosis in terms of approach to work. But if Parliament then takes this opportunity to bungle investigation or maybe make comments or report or recommendation that tend to undermine ongoing investigation, then of course the inescapable consequence would be the public would lose interest in their oversight role. I think for now it's possible to say that Parliament either is engaged in a chaotic expansion of mandate, or they have a very narrow or maybe confused approach of what their mandate really is.
But just to wind this up, because you know we're talking about a commodity that is in every person's home.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And at one point we heard the president speak about it when you know, his brother had been dragged into the saga. Beyond that, nothing. At the end of the day, still no clear direction on what Kenyans should be doing with sugar, with some very scary allegations made. I mean, does he need to say something and or intervene in this matter? Would that be overstepping? Should he leave it to agencies? Yeah.
The president has left Parliament to do its work. They have to
Which
make that.
they are not doing.
What Steve has said is correct. That now, if we identify where things went wrong, then there is the political consequence of that. And certain people must take responsibility. Where we are now, the Parliament has not helped the executive to take action. So what remains is now for the president to use his own wisdom. And also the instruments at his disposal to get the truth and take action. But if he depends on Parliament, it doesn't work. If you say, you have one member of Parliament saying, we were intimidated to bring the report before it was ready. Whose interest did you act? Then on the other hand, another one is saying, we wanted the report to come early, but you have brought a bad report, it is trash. Whose interest it is? We remain with sugar, which is probably not safe, or probably safe, and we are not sure.
And that's what
that is the big question.
And that's what I'm saying, Prof. Given, you know, if there is something wrong with this sugar, given the gravity of it, that it would really occasion a public health kind of emergency.
Yes.
And from the institutions that we're supposed to hear direction from, it is complete confusion. I mean, we're talking about the lives of Kenyans, and it seems to be a joke.
You see, the issue is we need to understand that how government should communicate. The rain started beating us when two CSs came out and said two contradictory statements. Because if we'd taken one to be true and they had the false, we would have had a definite course of action. But for now, we are in Schrodinger's cat situation where the cat is both dead and alive. In this case, it's not a cat, it is Kenyans. So we are either all dead, because if you've had sugar in the last, because this sugar was not brought into the country yesterday, it's been here since last year. So if you had sugar in the last 6 months, you either have lead and mercury and copper poisoning or you don't. But what the government needs to do with speed is, number one, give a sense of direction. If there was contaminated sugar, what have you done to mop it out of the market so it is out of the market? Two, what have you done to safeguard the country even before investigations are done, before we find who's the culprit? Tell us what actions have been taken to secure the population.
Right.
That's what is missing in this particular communication, so that now they're able to deal with the ramifications afterwards. But of urgency is to either assure Kenyans that the sugar is safe, or to assure us that you've taken proper action to make sure the sugar that was questionable has been removed from the market. That's what needs to happen.
You see, there was a time we were told that much of this sugar was in Mombasa, was in Nairobi, Kiambu, and a few other places. What we need to do to see from government is an on-the-spot check in Kiambu, so that the members of the public can see. You pick the sugar at random, and then you say, we are testing this sugar. There must be urgent tests that can yield the results immediately. Then you say, you know, this sugar is bad, and ask shopkeepers not to get scared of government, because probably they got a supply from some source and they are not the cause of the problem. But tell them to subject their sugar to tests, so that if they sell that sugar, they have 5-10 bags in their stores. After it has been checked, then they are confident enough to sell that sugar. That kind of direction should come from the government. And now in this case, we cannot just talk about the government. If Parliament has failed in its duties, the chief executive of this republic must take action quickly and resolve the matter, so that we restore the confidence of people in the sugar that is circulating.
All right, but you know, again, like I said earlier, to imagine that this is not known, I think or that we have just come up with this incredible wisdom that nobody else had. Really?
Maybe
Okay,
your opinion court is wiser than parliament.
I don't. You know, well, let me not comment.